All right. Welcome, listeners and fellow educators, to the Phenomenal Student Podcast. What's the Phenomenal Student Podcast? It's going to be a podcast that's going to profile experts in the field. We're also going to have some panels, and then also I may even profile some students in the process of some of my former students. And just going to discuss everything within education, coming from a different perspective. I hope to get all perspectives when it comes to education, not just one that sometimes dominates the field. Today in the first episode, I wanted to tell a narrative as I kind of started off doing this podcast journey. I wanted to kind of profile a lot of the people who were important toward my journey as an educator, which I'm still young in. So the first person, I couldn't do the podcast without the first person being Na'Carol Dixon-Hall. Now I know her as Miss Dixon. She was my literacy specialist my first 2 years. And everybody knows I love teaching ELA, and she kind of was the person to really make people understand. It isn't, I think sometimes the teacher, we focus on pedagogy, classroom management, and all those things. But the first time I watched her teach a lesson, I was like, wow. I mean, the energy level was through the roof, but it was really like, okay, you can be a high energy teacher and teach this way. And it's okay. You don't have to teach the way that I guess people are telling you you're supposed to teach. And that's when some kind of clicked at me. So that's why I always had a high appreciation for it, because I realized I could be myself in the classroom. So I felt like nobody else I would interview first than Na'Carol Dixon-Hall. So Miss Dixon,
Thank you.
Hall, how are you doing?
I'm well. It's been a minute.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. I guess probably almost 2 years, I guess. So, yes. So, as I start off one of my other podcasts, we always ask this question. We ask, why did they become an athlete or something like that? Or why did they come to my old school? So I'm gonna ask you, why did you become a teacher? And you have kind of an interesting backstory, even when you were a student yourself.
So ever since I can remember, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. As a matter of fact, I was at my grandmother's house 3 weeks ago for her birthday party, and she recalled this exact story. I was a bossy kid, which probably doesn't even seem like it has any correlations to this, but trust me, that as a young child, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And as my cousins and I played school, I always had to be the teacher. Like I would get in trouble because I was not sharing their responsibility or allowing my other cousins, Trish and Ashley, become a teacher. I just already knew, and it's kind of weird. I knew that that's exactly what I wanted to be. And so my grandmother said at one point, she just told them, just let her be the teacher. Just let her keep being the teacher. And when she's not here, y'all can be the teacher. It just got to that point, but I was just so adamant about always teaching. And then it kind of didn't help when I got to grade school. And this had a positive and negative effect. The teacher would teach something in the classroom, specifically math. And if the kids were looking confused, and I've been GT just ever since I was a young child. And so I would do those problems really quick. And so the teacher would be up there struggling a little bit. And I'm like, y'all come over here to my table. I'm gonna show y'all how to do it. Number one, that was out of order. And
y'all were pulling small groups.
Pulling small groups in second and third grade. And so it was just weird. And the kids would be like, but miss, I got it now. I can do it. Can I show you on the board? And the teacher would be like, let me see what you can do. And then they would get it. And so although I didn't go about it the right way ever since I was a young child, I just had a way of being able to teach people things where they can grasp it within a short period of time. And so that's just a snippet of why I want to teach, besides my love for kids. I absolutely love kids more than anybody. If it was just all kids on the earth, I would be perfectly fine without adults. They're easy to understand. I've always had a relationship. I have no kids of my own, but as you all know, I'm always with my cousins, my nieces, nephews. I just love and I have a passion for kids. So those two coupled together, I just knew I was destined for this.
I could see an administrator walking through and being like, finna evaluate the teacher on their RTI and be like, well, you get about a 2 or a 3, but that little Na'Carol girl, I think she gets a 4 or 5. She's accomplished or distinguished.
I got in trouble many of days for that, but I did not understand why I couldn't help them to learn better, you know.
I think I would have rolled with that. If they get the concept, I don't care. I think I'd be cool with it. All right. So you kind of spoke about that you are always really good in math, but your first year, I remember you telling me once that you were actually wanted to teach math, but that wasn't available. So they made you a reading teacher. So just tell me about that experience of kind of having to go in and dive in to teach the subject you really don't want to teach.
So I graduated from U of H. And I did not get a job right away. And that shocked me and everyone else. But at that time, this school system was going through the reduction in force. And so I had this contract with Aldine ISD because I graduated top 10% of my class, like where I was supposed to just go in and cash this in and automatically get a job. But that wasn't the case. And I'm so grateful for that experience, though. So I went to Clark Primary School, and I got this call for an interview, and they go, what's your favorite subject? And I was so adamant about math. Like I can do it with my eyes closed. I tutor trigonometry and calculus and all this. And they said, well, we had a teacher who just quit because she was getting ready to have a miscarriage because the kids in her class are really challenging. But it's a reading class. I like a challenge. So I go, okay, I'll do it. And I will never forget my partner teacher. We're still like this to this day. His wife is actually a principal in Tomball. And so we still have this connection. But when I walked in that day, because I got the job on the spot, they took me to the classroom in the portables. I will never forget. It sounded like boom, 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 boom. It was just stuff falling all everywhere. It was just total chaos. And so my partner teacher peeked from his room, and the administrator said, well, this is going to be your partner. And he chuckled. He chuckled and said, good luck.
Well, you think because you were so little?
Yes, I was so small, and these kids were just already overpowering all these other adults. And so I will never forget looking him in the eyes and said, you'll be a believer when it's all said and done.
Oh, trust
me. And I kind of did this like evil wink thing to him, and he still remembers it, and we talk about it. But yeah, I've only been able to teach language arts. Once I stepped foot in that ELA class, all my principals were like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to give you the opportunity to teach math. You've already, set the premise in this area, so we can't afford you not to teach language arts. So to this day, after 10 years, I have never taught a math lesson in a public school.
Well, I guess I understand that more now because reading is I'm not saying math is kind of easy, but I think reading's a little tough.
The ELA teachers, we think like that.
Yeah, math teachers feel a certain way about us too, so from what I've heard. So you did get that early success, and I guess back then they didn't have the star yet, but I'm sure that came up for you. But you kind of had that early success, but in a sense, you didn't get that recognition for that early success. So kind of just talk about dealing with that. Like you were kind of balling out, but probably wasn't getting noticed for being that person.
So after being in education for 10 years, when I taught second grade for 2 years, my students were growing at least 10 reading levels every year. That's at least, and that's by December. And so I still have the documentation to this day because some things are difficult for people to just kind of grasp and believe. It doesn't sound believable, but I still have the documents where my students were growing 10 to 12 reading levels at least every single year. And so there was no recognition that came through that. Of course, I was second grade. There was no STAR test or no, test to really just kind of bring all that together and be able to give me recognition. And then I got promoted to a third grade position. They were like, can you go over here to this school across the district and teach third grade for me? And I said, you know what? I don't know how I feel. I really fell in love with second grade, but I took the challenge. And so my students were excelling on the STAR test like nobody's business. So walking in as a first-time third grade teacher, was my third year of teaching. And for 85% of my kids to pass the STAR test on my first year, it was insane. I'll tell you this. They thought my students cheated. I figured it out maybe months later because they changed the whole system up the next year. And so of course, I gave the test to my students and everything was valid. And my students, I had already just prepared them so well for the STAR test that no one could grasp the idea that these students this is their first time ever getting 85% of this cohort to pass. And so, yeah, they changed the procedures the next year and we couldn't test our own kids. But that year they made a mistake because we got even higher scores. So it was like, you should have just left it how it was or whatever. But I was able to be super successful. And before YouTubers were like a real thing, I tried my own. It was so raggedy. It's still out there if y'all want to go.
I've seen a couple of the read alouds.
I had my students holding my cell phone as I read aloud. And it wasn't just like this smooth read aloud. I was really checking for understanding and stuff, and the camera was wobbling. But I think that it was a thought that counted. You can kind of see the passion shining through those videos. They were kind of raggedy, but I just had a way of reaching every student in my class. And I guess I really can't say every, because 85% of them passed STAR, but 100% of them were able to improve and increase their knowledge and skills within that year.
That's what's up. So you kind of move, of course, you hit the 85. So what was your top number, just for those who are listening to know?
95.
Man, like, and just for y'all, if there's any parents, anybody that's not an educator, for 95%, I'm not saying it's not as hard in math, but a lot of times that sometimes happens in math. But for kids to get 95% on a reading, on STAR test, no matter age level, it's I mean, so it's pretty legit. So because this kind of give y'all kind of just from a reading teacher standpoint with the STAR test, you have to read hard passages. Some say they're above level, which I don't 100% agree with, but they say they're above level. You have to read 7 passages a lot of times. So it's a lot harder than people realize. So you're talking about stamina, you got all these teats and skills you're supposed to teach them. So that particular 95%, that's where it's at. So how many times did you hit 95%?
Twice.
And
because I taught 3rd grade for 3 years. And
so you hit 95% twice in 3 years. That's a pretty good percentage. I think most would take that. Most would take that once in their career. To do it twice, that's not too bad. I'll say that. Yeah. All right. So it kind of got to, I guess would have been your final year in the classroom. You won the Red Apple Award, KHOU Red Apple Award. So tell me, like, how was that feeling when I saw the video, but how was that feeling when you got recognized for that?
That's a feeling I will never forget it. And as a matter of fact, nothing compares to that specific moment. Because when children campaign for you and they advocate for you, then that kind of really lets you know that you've been successful and you've been impactful. It's one thing for your peers to say, oh, Ms. Dixon is great. It's another thing for, the community to think that, but when the students who you service, those 44 students you see every day, when they say, you know what, I saw this award and my teacher deserves it, that was an experience like none other. They tricked me. I'm not easily tricked because I'll go snooping around and stuff. It was go Texan Day that particular year. And I'm a cowgirl. I just love putting my boots on and doing all that stuff and listening to country music. And so it was nothing out of the ordinary. And I had my students, I was like, okay, so tomorrow is our day. I'm a cowgirl. Make sure you're in your apparel and all this kind of stuff. And so we were getting ready and they kept telling me, hurry, I need your class. It's y'all's time to take pictures in the library. So I'm not thinking anything crazy. So I get all the kids who had on their Western gear and we go to the library and we're in there taking pictures. And all of a sudden this live camera crew comes into the library. And they're like, Miss Dixon, you are live on Channel 13 with
Let me fix my hair.
11, KHOU was 11 with Deborah Duncan and her morning show. And of course I couldn't hear or see the audience until later, but the host had this award in her hand and she was just telling me, your kids say you're awesome. She had these specific quotes. One of my students, I love her and I still work with her mom to this day, Tiana. Tiana was the person that they wanted to see first. We want to see who Tiana is. She thinks you are absolutely amazing and she thinks the world of you. And so Tiana was right there by my side because she never left. And she was there like, my teacher's so awesome. She teaches me stuff. And I never understood reading until I met Ms. Dixon and we passed our test. And then she pulled another student and it was just such an amazing experience to be recognized. And in fact, that very same day at my campus was the Teacher of the Year presentation.
Oh, wow.
So I was on live TV at 8:15 in the morning. And at 4 o'clock when we finished and had our faculty meeting, that was Teacher of the Year. Well, Teacher of the Year, we know sometimes it could be maybe like a popularity contest, your peers, and they don't get to go into your classrooms all the time to see the great work that you're doing if you're not on their grade level. So needless to say, in my 10 years, I've never won Teacher of the Year, but I was on national TV live in front of a studio audience. And this quote every time things get hard and get rocky and rough, I think about the quote that Deborah Duncan stated regarding me. And she said, this world would be a better place educationally if we had Miss Dixon times a million. And so when I feel like I just want to throw my pen down and shut my computer down, that quote just kind of cycles in my brain like Miss Dixon times a million, because those students and that live TV audience and my peers at that time got to see what kind of difference I was able to make. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of want to make that difference on steroids every day.
Well, it's a perfect transition, because obviously I think after that year, you end up getting a literacy coach position at Thompson Elementary in Spring ISD, where you still work at. So how was that transition from a role where, you know, you're this rock star teacher getting these phenomenal results, and then obviously you have to go in to be a literacy coach and you're trying to teach others to do what you did, which now that I'm a teacher, that's easier said than done. So talk about, like, what was your first thought when you took a role like that?
Okay, so I did not know for a fact at that time that it was a huge difference between teaching students and coaching teachers. And so that was a learning process within itself. And I remember interviewing with the principal at the time, Dr. Long, and he came in. You could tell he had had some interviews, you know, the last few days. And he came and said, what's special about you? And he still tells the story. And I had a notebook. I mean, I had a manila folder, and what was inside of the manila folder were my STAR test results. So he says I threw the manila folder down. I don't remember throwing it down. I may have lightly placed it there in front of him so that he could see the results. But I literally gave him the folder and put it in front of him and said, my numbers. And he said, your numbers? I said, well, I had my DRA results from when I first taught second grade, and those kids jumping 12 reading levels every year. I had that. And then my 85% passing on STAR, and then my 95%. And he said, wow, there's not much more for you to say. And he asked a few other questions, but needless to say, I was hired.
90% on STAR, that's...
because the proof was in the pudding. And so I'm mentioning that because when it came to coaching teachers, at first I thought it would be, you know, as simple as being with the kids. You build that relationship. You kind of state the importance of things. But the difference between children and adults is they have more years that they've been thinking the same type of way.
And they tend to be more childish, but that's all I'm sorry.
those are your words. But they've been thinking that way. And with adults, it's like one of those things where, who are you to tell me that I need to do something differently? And so the growing experience was not telling people what they should do, but allowing them to realize that something different should be done. And so I went from that first year with those first few months just saying, hey guys, we've looked at the scores. I've been researching some best practices and I think we should. And they wanted to fight, but little did they know I like to fight too. And boxing is my favorite sport. So I was going round for round and toe to toe. We came out with the win, but I realized that grownups don't want to be told what to do. You don't want to be told, hey, tomorrow, Mr. Short, wear the navy blue suit. You're like, what? Who are you to tell me? Why do I need to wear that one as opposed to another one? So I started this inquiry-based coaching cycle where I would say, hey, Mr. Short, when I came in, I noticed that 5 students had their heads down. What can we do about that? I put the ball back in your court. I took it out of mine.
That didn't happen in Mr. Short class, but okay.
Never. Let's make that claim for example purposes. And so that's where the teacher would have the opportunity to say, well, you know what, I could do this, or I could, when I notice their head sound, I could go and maybe touch their desk or tap their desk or do the close proximity method with them. But I was able to let them pose a question and have them to give me an answer. And then we could just kind of go back and collaborate from there. And so that's where that success started to come on later. It was less direct and more inquiry based.
Now, I'll tell somebody that was coached by her. I thought what was cool is what I've seen some administrators, they'll come in and see something you're doing wrong. And it's like, they'll put it in, I guess, in a formal written observation or something like that. And you're kind of almost like, hey man, for one, it'd been cool to know that when you were in the room. But, you know, what Ms. Dixon would do, she would come in, and I always tell people this story about how you came in once, and I think I was doing a reading lesson, and I think I had too many. I never like using the word low. That's not like one of my favorite words for kids that weren't that strong at one table together. You kind of explained to me that you should have high, medium, low, so the kids that are a little stronger can help the weaker students. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that, because you don't even be thinking about how you're grouping a room, but you weren't like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't blah, blah, blah. Because I've seen it done that way before. So I would tell people like her way of coaching wasn't like, it's like gotcha, or I can't believe you don't know this stuff. I'm like, I've been teaching for 5 months. Of course I don't know this. So you don't know it until somebody teaches you. So I would tell somebody this, somebody that was coached by you, that was very valuable, and you can immediately implement it. And I think, people focus on the scores, but when I watched you teach, it was more, I saw like the little things you do. You have all the kids turn to you, because teachers always talk about how the kids don't pay attention in this, but if they're turned towards you while you're instructing, they ain't got time to be kicking each other on the desk or doing other random stuff. They could be focused. So it was a lot of things. There was some stuff you did I actually kind of caught on to. I just didn't tell you. I kind of was like, I just did it, but I was kind of like, but I noticed what you did when you did this stuff. But I guess we can go for it. So I'm trying to see where I was at. Okay. So you talked about coaching adults instead of coaching kids. How is it to be judged by the performance of others? Obviously, when you got little kids, they perform for you, but it's different when you got a Mr. Short and 10 other teachers, and you compile their scores. Now you're gonna have certain teachers that get 80 and 90%, but then there's others that might get student standard or below. So how's it being judged by what adults do?
At first, it was kind of like a tough pill to swallow,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're met with resistance. But again, I don't quit, and I don't stop, and I like to fight. I like to rumble a little bit. So I took that as an opportunity. Like I took that opportunity as a challenge. And so when you think about sports and you think about these awesome teams, you immediately go and say, man, I bet that coach had a lot to do with it. The coach gets a little bit of that recognition, even though they wear all that on their shoulders. It's one of those things that it's just life. And so I had to swallow that pill and then put my best foot forward. And so then what I did was I started to say that my teachers were a direct reflection of me as a leader, because I'm only as strong as my weakest player.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
Yeah,
we're all in this game, this school game. And if I can't get this teacher to understand that she can't teach via whole group the entire 90 minutes, what kind of leader am I? So I had to have this toolbox with different ways and strategies and tips and tricks to be able to teach the teachers or show them and share with them, so that they can say, you know what, out of your whole toolbox, let me pull these two out so that I can use those to be successful. Again, I shared earlier that I stopped telling them what tool would need to be used. I knew good and well that you need a hammer to beat down a nail, but I had to pretend as if I did not know that that was the best tool in the toolbox. And I had to open my toolbox and say, okay, guys, here's the issue. Can we find a tool in this box that will best make sure that this nail gets all the way, put down into this wood? And the teachers, that will be their opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to use the hammer to do that. But I made that direct correlation between their teaching and my effectiveness as a leader. Because if I say I'm as good as I am, certainly I have one way out of 100 to be able to get this teacher to understand that his or her students learn best this way, or there are multiple ways to do things, not just one. And so I just kind of made that my personal challenge, and I'm glad to say that I'm continuing to do that to this day, and I've been pretty successful with it, using these different methods and modes, and there's not one way of doing that and getting all the teachers on board. But I think my secret is that inquiry-based method that I kind of.
So that's what you're doing.
My secret, but that's my secret.
All right. So to other people that are administrators, probably still having some struggles with that, because obviously your style was pretty unorthodox, the high energy style, and some of it still was backed up by expertise. So how is it going to coach? So if you have 20 teachers there, you might get one Mr. Short that's high energy, but it's pretty high chance most of them aren't going to be like your style. So how is it someone with an unorthodox style coming in trying to teach other teachers and get them to perform when, in a sense, you won't 10 Na'Carol Dixons, but there's a high chance you ain't gonna get any of those. So in most cases, so how's it being able to go in there and coach teachers who flat don't teach like you? Not like in a native sense, they don't teach as well, but more teach in a different way.
So it's important, like as that my teaching staff is really diverse as far as their teaching practices. I mean, let's be for real. If there were 15 Na'Carol Dixons,
I solve the problems in it, solve all the problems in education.
But there's no right or wrong, high energy, low energy in a sense. But what I do think about is student engagement. I put that at the forefront. So even if you're a more chilled and laid back and quiet and calm person, as long as 100% of your students are engaged, that's where I start giving my coaching nuggets. And then we start the coaching cycle based on that. So it's not quite about being high or low. It's about student engagement. And of course, for me, I was able to easily engage my students because my energy level was high, but other people are more cool and calm. And I will say one year I had a partner teacher who was cool and calm. And I didn't know how I would feel at first about that interaction because I thought that he or she should match my energy. But at the same time, it was a good balance. And I was able to actually learn from this partner so that they could have the same success in both classes. So we were able to mesh some of our teaching styles and our practices together to build that uniformity for those kids. So it's about balance, and it's about how the students are engaged. If the students are engaged with a high-level teacher, kudos. If the teacher is laid back, but the students are still engaged and they have their methods of doing things, then that's fine too, as long as the students are engaged and they're excelling and succeeding.
Now, I can tell y'all, someone that's watched her teach, she's very serious about that 100% engagement. People say that because it sounds cool on the interview. Oh, 100%. No. I'm telling you, it's really that real for her. I can still remember one time when I was watching her teach, and it was a particular kid. He actually had some challenges. I mean, wasn't a bad kid at all. He had some challenges, and she was like, "You better pay." I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, this is really not a game.
Yeah, accountability is the thing. And so, and I think about that accountability piece when you said the high energy. Of course, I'm high energy, and I'm a little feisty at the same time. So for me, if a student was off task or unengaged when I was teaching a lesson in your class, it took simply like a look. Or when I was teaching, my kids knew that if I twirl my hair back, like I have her attention because she's looking at me and twirling her hair like you didn't want that, right? How bad is that technically? But they just did not want to upset me or, disappoint me in any way. But when I was in your class, I would give the look, or I would say, at this point, everyone's paying attention and that's the only option. I mean, it was the bottom line. And so I'm more assertive in that area, but a calm teacher may lap the room and use close proximity to get that student who was unengaged to be engaged. So there are totally different ways. I'm just a little feisty and more upfront and direct with my
Yes, she was definitely that. I mean, I can still remember the next year with one particular student. I was like, man, I think she's still stuck on that. She's like, oh yeah, that pretender, that was the word she used to use. She called them pretenders. Like, oh, I remember that pretender such and such. I'm like, man, you still stuck on that? That was
yeah. Because I like the and like even with coaching and being an administrator, false compliance is like my pet peeve. And so when I was saying like the word pretender in the classroom, it's like a student who's like just pretending to pay attention. I don't want pretenders, because then you can't pretend when you take your assessments and they really want to know what you know. There's no pretending at that moment. So, just really hone in and be engaged. So.
Right. So I just wanted to let y'all in on that. Like, this is not a game. She really takes this kind of serious. So I would say after my first year, I guess we were together and you were at Thompson for 2 years. You got promoted up, but then I guess you ended up back at Thompson. And next year, I kind of remember seeing you at a training. I was like, what's she doing here? I'm like, that was kind of weird. And he was like, oh, I'm gonna work some magic. I'm like, what? I'm like, I think that's what you said. Something along
that sounds like me.
I was like, okay. I was like, is Dixon coming back? I was like, so let's talk about that experience. So was it kind of you had to take a couple steps back to go a couple steps forward? So kind of just explain that. I'm sure people will access it.
My goal has always to be a principal. And so along that path, of course, I've had several promotions. And so after being a literacy coach, of course, our third year my second year at Thompson, it was like a switch around. We went from being a tier 3 campus to being a tier 1 campus, and actually we tied for the number 3 spot that particular year, and that's simply amazing.
Was that year 3? I'll say year 2.
That was year 3 because you were there year 2, right?
Yeah,
so
year
you
2
were in
and
that
then.
process when we were getting those processes just together. Year 3 was the actual turnaround year, and that year was nothing less than amazing. There were some unorthodox things that happened on my behalf to be able to shift us in that direction, but we made it. We made it from being number 15 in the district to being number 3.
I don't know who could have possibly helped get us there in reading.
I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know.
No, yes.
But I digress. But what was your original
well,
question?
I was gonna get around to like I guess
you talk about me working at the district level.
Yes, I talked about. I guess before that 3rd year, I guess that's when you came back. Before that 3rd year, you went up to the district level. You came back. So was that kind of like you had to take a couple steps backwards to go forward situation when you came back?
So the success we had those first 2 years was phenomenal. I mean, just within itself. And so I got a call saying, man, can you duplicate whatever your plans are for your campus, for all the campuses, and, all the elementary campuses in the district? And so I was like, man, I knew I was on the verge of that tier 1 status for Thompson. So it was a struggle between this promotion that I knew I could service more people and get more success that way. But then there was that struggle where I've been with these teachers for 2 years, and I just knew that year 3 was the year deep down inside of me because we were right there on the edge. And I went on and took that position and, gave that a shot. But my heart was at Thompson Elementary. And I just, like I said, I knew year 3 was that year. So I made some stuff shake, and I was able to go back to Thompson for year 3 to be able to really do the slam dunk and we did it. It was a knockout. It was a very successful year.
Now, I'll tell people somebody that was there that year, and I don't even think me and Ms. Dick, we worked more closely my first year at Thompson as a rookie, but my second year, you became like the ESL coordinator mid-year because someone else got promoted. So you kind of had a whole bunch of responsibilities. But I would tell you, anybody that's a coach or administrator, the best thing you can do for a person is allow them to be them. And I think mid-year, that second year, I kind of started doing plans and things like that. She didn't come and say like, oh, do it this way or do it that way. And I become like just a freak when it comes to doing plans now. But if she came in as the literacy coach and was like, no, you got to do it this way and blah, 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 I'd have been like, you would never get that growth. So that year, the foundation already was laid. She already had kind of set everything in motion. All we really had to do was execute it, really. So I don't remember that second year being as much as her coming in telling us a way to do it. I remember that my first year, but at the end of the day, the results still spoke because that foundation was already laid. So I just kind of, that to anybody who's a coach or anything like that, it isn't always about being the person trying to tell people how to do stuff. You set your plans and then let them execute it, as I would hope you kind of would do with your kids. All right, so after that phenomenal year, we had those great years and all those things. You end up getting promoted up to assistant principal. So talk about getting that call. I guess your dream is to be a principal. So getting that call to be an assistant principal and kind of learn before you step into that role.
And I was so excited about the opportunity to even have my first and last AP interview. At this point, I got the phone call, and I'll be honest with you. When I got the phone call, I heard the name of the school at the beginning because they said, this is such and such from Cooper Elementary School. And I was like, okay, Cooper Elementary School. And I had heard all these awesome things about Cooper. But I'll be honest with you, I said, I don't think that was Cooper. I made it in my mind be a different school that I thought would want a person like me because I am this unorthodox. I am this rough around the edges. I'm not as prim and proper and polished as some of the other administrators are. And so literally in my head, I kept telling myself, it's not that school. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly. They don't want a me. But little did I know that that school needed a me. And the students there needed someone like me to flip my hair back and say, you go in that classroom today and you do your best. You understand me? With that little eye like this, and making that connection with kids and talking to those young girls saying, be who you are. Look at me. I look like you, I sound like you, we can do this. I started from where you are. I had these struggles just like you. And even being able to lift up those students who didn't have as many of those issues on the surface, they did need me. They needed somebody they can talk to who would tell them the truth, because I don't tell children a lie. I have my ways about doing things and how I communicate the truth to the students, but I really get them to understand things at a higher level. And again, that's another secret nugget with the success I had in the classroom and then the success I had as a coach is encouraging critical thinking without saying, hey guys, today we're going to critically think. No, it's just that I do in the hallway with my students every time, every day when they greet me in the mornings. I give them something to think about, something that I know I'm going to come back and check in with them on in the next week. But it's going to take a lot of thought, but I'm not telling them that I'm building them as a critical thinker or, that I'm building their knowledge base, because then they're not going to, it's not.
It's lame when you do all that. That's like, I'm like, what is that? Like,
right. And so that's one of the methods I use with my teachers when I'm coaching them. I don't go in like this is a coaching session. I go in asking a question. Hey, when I was in here, I saw da 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 da. What did you think about that? And here we are. We come to this grand, realization that this is needed. All the while, I kind of knew that that's what the need was and that's how we should meet it, but getting people to realize that, and I do that with students with behavior. There's a thing now, it's a thing I'll say, because they've given it a name. It's the restorative practices. I had no clue that I've been doing that for 10 years. When I get my students and we get in that circle and we talk about how an action may make another person feel, and we literally step and put ourselves in another person's shoes and say, so you're Mr. Short today. When Ms. Dixon walked into your room last time, how did that make you feel? Tell us about that situation. What can we do next time to make that a little bit better for you? I had no clue that was going to have a name 10 years later and be part of this multi-million-dollar industry when it comes to education. But and so that's just a day-to-day routine for me.
So talk about how important that is. Well, I don't know what that was. How important that is to perform. I mean, in my early years as a teacher, I see it has an overall great effect, like building that confidence and those things. I think what I've seen in my early years as a teacher, sometimes people get so caught up on the method or this approach, the phonics-based or the whole language. I don't even feel like going into that rabbit hole, but still, just the way you do it, but they don't focus on the heart of when it comes to being a reading teacher, like how you make kids feel. So talk about the importance of that and getting that high performance.
And I'm a person who loves to celebrate small successes. Because, and I say that because when you're in a classroom and you're with 22 students and I've often had 7 non-readers, sometimes 10 non-readers in my class. Getting them to understand those small successes. No, I couldn't throw a Harry Potter book at those students who were non-readers. Did I have students in there who were reading those thick Harry Potter books? Absolutely, but celebrating small successes where one of my students was able to pick up a book at a level A, and it was one of those books that had repetition. The grass is green, the car is this color, and they can, read based on the picture, but celebrating those small successes. And what that does is that makes a person eager to do more and learn more, because they're saying, I've done that at this level and I've been successful. So you can take inches to get to where you're going. Oftentimes we like to try to do this leap. Not everybody does the high jump. We're not going to get there that way. Let's just be realistic, but celebrating those small successes. And the same thing with teachers in the classroom. When you were a rookie teacher, we celebrated, or I celebrated you for those small things that you were doing. Even when I came in to model and you would implement some of those pieces, I had to tell you whether I saluted you.
Trust me, I look back now and I was like, man, I remember one time I actually celebrated my kids to get 60%. I was like, what?
What was I doing? But it led to your ultimate, when you got that high percentage that last year that you were there. So, and I will never forget that. But celebrating small successes, and I'm just really big on that, so teachers can know, oh wow, I implemented this and it worked. So next time your coach comes in or your administrator or your instructional leader comes in, you're more apt to listen to what they're saying and implement it for another level of success. And so I think that's really important.
So I guess kind of let everybody in your mind, get them the secrets to get 95%. Now you can't really duplicate a Na'Carol Dixon, but like, what were some of the things you did when you were in your classroom to help your kids? Because I think, and that was one of the questions I was gonna have, because sometimes people don't understand the difference between like getting that high performance. Because I think people's perception is when you get high performance out of that, maybe you cheat, or two, it's some type of drill and kill method. So talk about your method to get that high performance, and obviously getting kids to be able to read as well. How do you combine both? Because it seems like sometimes it's hard to do both.
So what I did was I simply made sure that everyone on my team, which were my students, they all played a role in this success. And here's what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. My non-readers, as you know, they can think deeper than a student sometimes that can read at a higher level or can read on grade level, because they've had to kind of mask that the fact that they're not a reader per se, and they can critically think. And so they had something to bring to the table. My GT students, we know that they can breeze through words and they have this great understanding of things, and then they may have a different way to think about something, a higher level to think. So I use them. I use my on-level students. I use their expertise. And so that multi-level grouping and that heterogeneous grouping was really important, because that's how I got that 95%. And so I never stood before my students for more than 15 minutes telling them anything.
I'm glad
I was the expert in the classroom from the outside looking in, but how long do you want to hear an expert tell you how they made $1 million when you don't get the opportunity to stop and go and practice? And so sometimes you'll go in the classrooms and a teacher is up there for 30 minutes and I'm like, oh no, I want to save her so bad. And so I never spent more than 15 minutes. I would tell them, hey guys, today we're getting one step closer to our 100% goal. And here's what we're going to do today. We are going to learn how to use our context clues to figure out what words mean. I mean, think about this. Right now, I want you to make sure that I made up a weird name for a shoelace. I want to make sure that whatever that name is tied tightly, because we're going to go outside and have a race, and I don't want anyone to stumble and fall. What do you think that weird word meant that I just said? It's a shoelace. These are my non-readers. Everybody's hands are up. 100% of the kids' hands. It's a shoelace, because how did you know that? Well, because if we don't tie it, we're going to fall. It was simple. And here's what I said to let them go on. After that few minutes of my I do, right? So today we're going to go into a passage. You're going to be in your reading groups. There are going to be some words that you don't know how they mean. But remember, we have 3 ways that we can figure out what unknown words mean. And I showed my anchor chart and I said, so get in your groups and I'll come back to check on you in about 15 minutes. Off you go. That was it. It didn't take rocket science. I wasn't up there sweating. It was a very casual and calm conversation, and they went off into their groups. And again, I had the high, medium, and what some people would call low students together, just sharing their knowledge and expertise. And so I'm walking around, not twiddling my thumbs, but saying, oh, Chris, can you say that again? I really liked what you shared. And I may stop the whole class and say, I heard something really important, guys. I think you may need to know this. And that was the gist of my class. And then I would pull a small group, of course, because kids can sometimes, and even adults, we can mask what we don't know. Right. How many times have you been in a faculty meeting and they say, everybody understand? You say, yeah.
You don't want to keep the meeting going, so you don't want to be that.
Keep the meeting going. So I pull those 3 to 4 students to my back table and looking at that data and say, hey, I noticed that all of you guys missed number 2. Man, how did we let number 2 beat us up? What happened? Casual, cool, and calm, because even I will get my guard up when something sounds so formal. I automatically put a shield up. If someone were to come in my office and say, all right, we need to look at these discipline practices and we need to go through these and we need to see what's right and wrong. And I'm looking like, back up. Like I want to back up 5 steps, but I can't. But I try to do and coach others how I knew as a knucklehead teacher my first couple years, how I knew I didn't want to be approached. I didn't want you storming into my classroom and immediately taking over my lesson. I didn't want that. So I don't go and do that. I may leave a sticky note saying, man, you really rock this. Stop by my office so we can chat more. That's more appropriate to me. And thinking about a me. Again, there are different types of teachers and administrators and leaders, but thinking about a me, you couldn't walk into my classroom back then and do that without me being like super puzzled, or without me going into my shell and no longer producing the great results that I normally produce, because now I feel like I was unsuccessful and you called me out on it. So now I'm scared to do what I normally do. And no one, the people who, you know, were hindered most in those types of situations were my students, because I wasn't able to give them the 1,000% that I normally give them because I wasn't able to flow. It's something when you're able to flow.
Yeah, and like that confidence piece, like I've been there where your confidence go and you're just like, the kids can tell too, they're like animals. I don't use that word in that way, but they're almost like animals. They smell blood. When they smell blood, they're going to attack. So if they see that you ain't got no confidence up there, it's not going to be pretty for you. So as an AP, you come in, I guess one of the, aspects of it, kind of similar when you came in as a teacher, this little teacher and you think you wouldn't be able to do it. You come in as an administrator, and you told me a little while ago that they didn't even know you were Na'Carol Dixon, you know? So how's it coming in like as a young administrator trying to get sometimes veterans to listen or respect you? I don't even say listen, that's not probably the way to phrase it, but respect you, even though they know you're pretty young.
Right. So it was the same with coaching. When I first came to Thompson and all those teachers had been there, my campus is a campus that has been open for 15 years now, and many of my teachers have been there. They came with the bricks. And so imagine little old me walking in there, getting ready to talk about discipline practices and, you know, best practices all around and things like that. And they're looking like, but again, the proof is in the pudding. And so my numbers don't lie. Past successes don't lie. And I'll tell you what's so important. It's just important to just be a good person all around. And I'm sharing that because when I came to that school, I didn't know many teachers. I think I may have seen like maybe 4 or 5 of them out in trainings and stuff like that. But I'll tell you who did know me, the community. There were people, there was probably about maybe 50 families in the community that already knew me, because I keep my face in the community. Whenever there's a need, I'm there, even though it was across town from where my other campus was. And that really helped a lot. And so those families that knew me and could vouch for me, they were doing their jobs in the neighborhood. Y'all, we have an amazing assistant principal. If she said this happened, trust me, this really did happen. She stands on her word. And, you know, so the parents were able to vouch for me there. And then I had students. We know we have a high mobility rate in Spring ISD sometimes because life happens to people, right? And so there were students who came from Thompson and who are now at Cooper still to this day. And I remember it was one student, he was supposed to be the most challenging student. They never told me the student's name. They were gonna give me a test. Okay, good luck trying to test me, but okay. They were gonna give me a test and say, man, we're gonna see how good you are when you can deal with this student. And literally that student walked in at Meet the Teacher and said, Miss Dixon, oh my God, you're here. Where have you been? So their most challenging student had already been taught by me at Thompson years prior. And so because I have the toughest student on my side, everything else was a piece of cake, which I knew it would always be, because I am a relationship-based leader. And so I build a relationship. I know each one of my students' names. There's not one that will walk past that I don't know their name, and something awesome about them. So my daily conversation in the morning when I'm greeting them is not, good morning, have a great day. It's, good morning, Jeremiah, how's that book going? Make sure you let me read that next page. Don't you publish that book without me reading it? That's what it sounds like for 747 students.
So how do you balance that out? I mean, sometimes I won't say they do it on purpose, but a mistake sometimes some administrators sometimes make is, you had a relationship, but it seems like the kids end up having a stronger relationship with you and the teacher. How do you balance that out where it don't seem like you're taking, and I've seen some administrators in the past, they kind of want to balance that out where the kid doesn't feel like, I'm trying to get my words right on this, where they feel like your relationship with the kid isn't taken away from the relationship with the teacher.
Right, I've experienced that before. And so what I do in that instance is, I make sure that I explain to the teacher or make myself more available so that we can truly become a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those students see that collaboration, then
Mm-hmm.
they know I can't sneak one by my teacher and try to go to Miss Dixon, or I can't, tell my teacher this, that Miss Dixon said this, so we don't have to do this. It's all about teamwork, because it really does make the dream work. And so working alongside those teachers, and I would actually pop in and be in there with the teacher and say, hey, Miss So-and-so, what are we doing today? How's it going? How was that goal? Did that student meet that goal that we talked about doing? Like, I would do some things like that just so that we can constant communication. And I'm sure you can attest to this, being a classroom teacher, because think about what happens when a student puts their parent and their teacher against one another. It is terrible.
Right.
Like, no one wins. The student is at an advantage in a sense at that moment, but no one wins in that instance, because they say, well, now the parent doesn't trust Miss Dixon, and I'm gonna listen to everything my baby says. But that's not the case. And so making sure that we're one is really important. And I just get to know those teachers, and I say, hey, when I come in next time, what you want me to say? What do you want me to do? What have you been noticing that student does? And so that I can say, these things. And so I've been able to have a pretty good amount of success with that even this past year. That was an issue.
Now, I do think it's important when a kid realize they can't run game, and they know like that it ain't. So I guess as kids, all of us did it, where you might go to mama or go to daddy or go to whoever if the other, you don't agree with the other one's talking about. So I mean, the role is different in a sense because you're in the school, but that's pretty. Kids are smart; they know how to manipulate. So
yeah, and just to add to the other question you were asking me about coming in as a new AP to these veteran teachers, I was telling you that the proof is in the pudding. So I don't say a lot of, I will be awesome for you, I will make sure your discipline is taken care of. I don't do the rally kind of stuff. I say what the expectation is going to be, and then I do more with my actions. Because the parents can say anything. How many times have you heard a person say, I'm going to be there for you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make sure that you don't have any interruptions in your classroom? But instead of saying all those things, I go pop into those classrooms multiple times a day, especially where I have my frequent flyers. I'm in there, even if I'm looking through the window, they know. You can see the kids go. That helps a lot. And my teachers were like, thank you for coming by and just kind of peeking your head in. It really helped the class to kind of flow. And my students didn't get triggered that day, those kinds of things. So just acting and not saying so much.
Now, I will say, like, it is a difference when, as a teacher, you kind of don't think your administrator got your back. So if you have an issue with a parent or with a student, whatever, you kind of are a little bit more hesitant to bring them into the loop if you don't have to. But if you know that person got your back, you'll tell them, but you won't even hesitate to tell them, like, hey, I got this little issue. How you think I should handle it? So that's very important, just from a teacher's standpoint. So I'm gonna get to just the overall just questions as far as like being in your role. What is the most, I guess, two questions. What is the most challenging part about being in your role as an assistant principal? What is the most rewarding part about being in your role?
All right, so the challenging part is, because an assistant principal is most of the time in charge of discipline and testing and more of the day-to-day operations. One of the challenges is I'm a literacy, not expert, I'm knowledgeable in the area of literacy.
95% says otherwise, but okay.
I'm pretty knowledgeable. So the challenge is being able to squeeze time in from my other roles and responsibilities to share that knowledge and expertise. And so I kind of took a crack at it this past year, and these were the words of my teachers, and I shared this with you, that one of my team said, Miss Dixon, and I've been at this school for 2 years, Miss Dixon, I didn't know you knew so much about language arts. I think everyone should know this, because I started going in and putting discipline to the side just a little bit. I had things rolling like a well-oiled machine, so I didn't have to spend so much time on the discipline part. And I was able to go and do PLCs, and my teachers were literally in awe, mouths wide open, like, we've never heard of this strategy before. And they were like, who taught you? I was like, I might have made it up. I don't know. No one taught me. I just kind of did like a trial and error for my years in the classroom. And so that's one of my biggest challenges, because I do want to be a principal someday. And I do want to be, we call the principals now instructional leaders. I do want to be an instructional leader. And I have so much to offer. when it comes to English language arts, that I want to be able to share that. Like a lot of times I'm sitting in my office or I'm walking in the classrooms or I have a student by the hand and we're talking and I'm just kind of going through some things with students and some teachers. And I'm like, but if I can get down there to fourth grade in their writing lesson, I promise you, I can help them to turn those scores around. And so this year, I'm just going to make it a point. I'm going to make it a point, and I know this online instruction has been a challenge for everyone. Trust me, I'm tired of looking at a computer screen, but I'm going to take this as an opportunity to be able to go into those online sessions and share some of my knowledge and expertise and really co-teach with some of my teachers, since I'm not going to be face-to-face per se the first 4 weeks. But that's my biggest challenge. The reward is seeing the differences that are being made. Seeing students who used to come in tearing stuff up to being model students and model scholars. And that right there makes my heart sing, and it makes me come back the next day. Another thing is seeing teachers like you who have taken those bits and pieces and those nuggets and the tools that I've shared to put in your toolbox and seeing them be successful and say, hey, check out the data from this assessment, or hey, can you come and look at this lesson? Even some of my teachers who are more timid at first saying, hey, at 10:15, you would be proud to see what's going to happen in my room. And I am breaking my neck, making sure I'm there at 10:14 to see the success. And again, those small successes and, small victories, really celebrating those. So that's the pro to it that my challenge.
So was that something you're kind of intentional about? Like, I guess, that would be a immediate credibility thing. And sometimes coming in and saying, I was 95% in the classroom. I mean, I'm sure that's not going to be your first, statement to the teachers, but it's hard because I know you told me that most of them didn't know you were a special ELA. I'm like, what? That's crazy. I was like, considering you were that type of good, you know what I'm saying? So were you intentional about not trying to bring up that part of, your teaching history when you first came in?
Right. I was intentional about not telling them about my classroom successes because like I was telling you, as I learned as a coach, adults are different. They don't want, they may see it as bragging if you say, hey guys, trust me, this strategy worked, and again, I'm one of those now people that say the proof is in the pudding. I'm just going to put my actions forward, my best foot forward to show you what it is that you need. And so that's what I kind of have started to do. So I purposely didn't share with them that I've had 95% of my kids passing. And again, I'm at a campus who have had high rates of passing. But I will have to go out and say this because we were using Eduforia when I was a classroom teacher, when I had those 95% passing years. And you used to see what teachers, were on the top. And I'll be honest, my campus now has always been a high performing campus together, but there weren't any teachers for ELA that had been able to beat that 95% passing rate. And so I kind of remember some of those names for being a little bit on the list, maybe number 2 or 3, but they weren't able to get that number 1 spot for those 3 years that I was teaching. But I didn't tell them. And so, like I said, this year I'm going to make it a point, and last year I tried to make it a point a little bit more to make myself present in those PLCs and to really be a voice when it comes to ELA.
If I say that 95%, I would say those are teacher goals, but still on that quest. So I went too far, but still, I'm trying to get there. So I think you kind of answered it, but I kind of was going to ask, like, what is, like, people don't know about your role? You talked about what's challenging, what's rewarding. What's some people don't know about being in the role of an assistant principal? Because I think, teachers, of course, that's one of their favorite pastime, complaining about administrators and stuff like that. What don't they know about being in your role?
It's a lot to juggle. And it's one of those jobs where you are expected to know almost everything. Not everything, because think about being a classroom teacher, you're like, my principal should know this. She should, he or she should be able to answer all these questions. And so being an assistant principal is like, I should almost know everything from the eyes of a teacher or even a student. And so just kind of juggling all the things that people think you should know. That's a difficult piece. And then just trying to find your balance and your voice and your niche when it comes to being an assistant principal. One of my niches, and it's kind of obvious for people who don't know that I'm an ELA specialist, they see how I work with discipline. That's my niche. And I think to this day, they never told me why I was chosen for Cooper and all that. I've never heard the rationale as far as why. But in my mind, I'm thinking because of my discipline practices that I've been able to implement and those relationships that I can build with students. I don't have to give myself a pat on the back. I don't do that often. But the way I'm able to engage students and their parents, I'll put myself up against anybody in that area. And so now my parents are like, Ms. Dixon, whatever she says, we're with it, because I've been able to open my door truly and coach parents. Like, I go into the homes. That's not a part of my job role, Mr. Short. I don't get paid to do it. They might even tell me not to, but I go with my parents and try to figure out, why is he acting out at home so much? Because he's not going to do it with Miss Dixon. So I know he's capable of not doing it at all. So I go into the home sometimes. What are we eating for dinner tonight? And I heard your mom say you've been doing this. She just asked you to go clean your room. I'm going to wait right here until you go and do that. It's truly building that partnership. And so that's my niche, being a community, being a part of the community, and having that love for discipline, because I wasn't a very good kid. And so that's where I have
that's kind of what I wanted to touch on at the beginning. You told me a pretty colorful story when you were a student. I was like, well, she don't want to get into this, so we just gonna.
I'm fine, because I live in my truth, and I'm a believer that everything has a purpose, and there you have to go through some experiences. And so I was not a very good kid, and I can say that in a sense, behavioral wise. I made straight A's, straight 100s, straight 90s, all the way through school. But those elementary years and even middle school years were tough, because I wanted to get in that elementary classroom, and I wanted to teach the class, and that was inappropriate at the time, right? There was a time and place for everything. Now was the time and the place. But I also was bored often, because I thought at such a high level. I was bored. They give me my work, even when I would have to go to what they would call SAC. Like, get her out of here. She's talking too much. She's walking around my classroom. She's disrupting. I really just wanted some more rigorous work. That's really what I wanted, and that's what I craved. Give me a group to teach. That's why in my class, I don't have
teaching groups. That's still true.
I had two students who I had being their group leader. Give me a job. Make me an accountability partner for someone. Give me something to do, so that I'm not sitting there watching you teach something that I learned, at the daycare 3 years ago. Like, please, like, hear me out. But I didn't have the words to say that. And so I was suspended a lot. I was in the principal's office often. All the principals that I've had, their families even know me, and that's a shame. But they're proud now. All they say when they see me now is, man, you've turned your life around. I'm so proud of you. But all those instances had a purpose for me. And so there's not a kid too tough for me to deal with when it comes to discipline, because you didn't get tougher than me. It's sad to say. And so I've pretty much seen it all. Because I was a handful. I have some of my teachers that teach in spring right now, so they could attest to it. Some of my old principals, they're principals in spring now, so they can attest to it. It's not a lie. When she said she tore the room up, she tore the room up. And I was sharing with a group of colleagues the other day that I remember tearing the room up sometimes just as a way out. Because if I had to hear that teacher teach at this low level again, I was just gonna like pull my hair out. And so I would go, here's the chair, boom, get out, Na'Carol. Yes. And that's a shame. And so as I'm coaching and leading, I'm like, I don't want a teacher to have to deal with that. And I don't want a kid to have to be in the classroom saying, let me throw this chair so I can get out, because her instruction is terrible. I don't want that. So when I'm coaching and giving feedback, I have that in the back of my mind.
And I can tell teachers who maybe she understands, I guess, from, well, two things. One, I can remember when I was teaching 5th grade, Miss Dixon, I remember she came and talked to one of my students, and she said, it's like, oh, and don't do such and such. I know that's why you do it. And I was like, I think she
I had it down. I remember that student. I remember that conversation word for word, Mr. Short. And I had to tell that student, don't you get in here. Put put your head down so that you can get put out, or don't you get in here and close that notebook and you know, slide that chair over and get mad and huff and puff, because this particular student would huff and puff. And I go ahead and take your last puff and then we can talk.
Yeah, and even I understand, I guess kind of what you kind of was speaking to is like being that GT kid and being like, I mean, I was technically GT, but I didn't really care. So I wouldn't even care if he even got out the class. I just was like, whatever, let's get this over with. But it wasn't like, then I would actually probably feel the need to. But, and then just like to other teachers, like when you're teaching at that low rigor, you got, kids know how good you are. Like they may, man, I bet they articulate it as you were saying. You don't know to say, oh man, Miss so-and-so, man, she can't teach nothing. Sometimes they can. Now the GT ones tend to be able to tell. So I think you kind of like, to any of the teachers out there, she's kind of telling you like, if you teach at a low rigor and you got them kids that are high level, especially their behavior issues, which I've experienced in my career, their behavior issues, they gonna act up and they gonna turn up. And I was gonna say, like, as a teacher, I can remember my first year teaching math. Reading, I was okay, but when I got to math, it was kind of a horror show. And what I started to see is I got better at teaching math, all of a sudden the behavior reduced. I'm like, Eureka, it's amazing. So,
it's one of those things where if you don't fill in the blanks, they're gonna fill them in for you.
I remember a particular person telling us that during the staff meeting. I always tell people that. I always tell them two things, like as you said, like if you don't fill in the blanks, they will. And I'm definitely starting to see that, as you said, getting up there talking for 15 minutes, because once you get into 15, 20, 25 minutes, they're gonna be like, man, really? Like, come on, man. Like, I don't care how awesome you think I could do voices, I can do all that stuff, but they don't want to hear me for 20 minutes.
I mean, and as an adult, who's this smart and this talented to take, you know, have this millionaire coach in front of you, right? And telling you for 30 minutes, if you do these things, and they've listed all these steps, and I mean, after 30 minutes, I only remember 2 of the steps, so I'm not gonna be a millionaire because I haven't had time to really, you know, process and think about what it is that you just shared with me. And so that's the thing with not staying before students for longer than 15.
Now, what's funny, I've talked to other teachers, and you know, you go to these trainings and they're like a bunch of PowerPoints, things like that. We complain like, oh, this is boring. You already don't want to be there. And you're like, oh, this is boring. This is this, and then I was like, yeah, it's cool. But then you go do the same thing in your classroom. But and I've seen a lot of people do that. I'm like, you're complaining about this, but then you go do it. And it's kind of like, if you don't like this, what you think, and you're a fully fledged adult with a fully formed brain, what you think an 8-year-old gonna do when you start doing the same thing? So, because I know the trainings I love going to is when the person might talk a little bit, but they let you talk with everybody and interact and do like little activities. That's how you learn the most, because you remember them trainings, the ones where they just go through a slide. You're like, all right, can we just get this over with? I can get my credit. So, I guess it's a little different. When I talk to athletes, they always say, "What's next?" But of course, as an educator, it's not always as simple as just you get into another role, just got to get hired. So unless you start your own school. But so what is next for Na'Carol Dixon? I guess I'm still gonna ask the question. What do you think is next for you?
What's next is I want to perfect my craft. I want to be an assistant principal for as long as I need to be one, so that I can have more tools in my toolbox. Because you know, the higher up you go, you know, there are different situations that are thrown at you. And so if I were to be a principal or get a call to be a principal tomorrow, I don't know that I'm ready yet, because I may not have all the tools that I need. And that's just a message for people who are looking to kind of move up and get promotions and things. Always make sure that you do a self-reflection as to where you are now, and just be realistic about what the expectations are in the role that you are going to pursue, so that I know right now I don't have all the tools. I'm not as resilient as I should be. And I don't want to go into a principal role not being able to let things roll off my shoulder or taking things personally. Not that I do that now, but every now and again, we are human and we all have a pulse, right? And so it's easy sometimes to internalize some things that teachers may do or students may do. But I want to get to the point where I am more robust and I am able to just kind of be more resilient. And I want to be that instructional leader, and I want to be better with time management. Like I said, as an assistant principal, I want to be so good with it that I can be a testing coordinator, do discipline, and never have to say a word about how much they are. And let me tell you how I know I'm not there yet, because I'm still saying every now and again, man, I'm tired. That was so much. I had to scan all those STAR test books. I don't know, or I think I'll know when I'm ready to move forward, when it's not even mentioned all the pieces that I'm having to juggle, but I can do them effortlessly. And so that's when I think I'll know that it's time to be able to do what I need to do as far as being a principal or having my own school or something to that nature. I'll know because I'll have the tools in the toolbox where I'm able to easily fix situations that would have normally taken more time, more thought, more tears, more sadness. I'll be able to say, oh, Miss Such and Such, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's sit down and chat about what we could do differently the next time, and not take it personally like, oh no, she didn't just try it. And sometimes I still have those, oh no, she didn't just try it moments. And I don't want to have those. I'm being transparent at this point. I don't want to have those. I want to be able to say, man, she did that because I see where she's trying to go with that, why she used that strategy. It wasn't a jab at me in any sense. When she faked sick for 3 days, it's not because she doesn't like me and she didn't want to pass my office. Sometimes we think about that in our, we're human. And so I want to be more resilient, and I want to be this amazing instructional leader where as an assistant principal, I can walk in there and people can put me on the spot and say, Ms. Dixon, can you teach this part? And I say, absolutely. Where are we now? And I don't even need a lesson plan. Give me the topic or the
concept. Need that.
I don't need a lesson plan. Give me a topic and a concept, and I'm good to go. And I'm shooting for the stars with it. So I want to be able to show that my ELAR experience and juggle everything and be resilient. So that's what's next for me.
I could think about one time my third year, I was talking with my principal at the time, and I was sitting in his office. We weren't even talking about nothing super serious, and I was just having a conversation. And I remember maybe in the span of 5 minutes, this person came in, the secretary came in, got a phone call, got this. I was like, what the thing? I was thinking that I think, you want those roles, but then you're like, yeah, I could think of a kid just crying about something. I could think of a student this year was, I think had lost some money or something like that. It's like, here go $5. You good. Like I couldn't, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to deal with it. Like I just gave him, I don't even carry cash half the time. But I was like, here, it's cool. Like I was like, cause I realistically, I was trying to be nice, but at the same time, I didn't feel like this. Like, I was like, here's this $5. So I can just move on. So I can imagine as a principal, you can't exactly, of course, not give money to problems. It's cheating or whatever you want to call it, whatever the word would be. So you can't just do that. So I can understand how difficult it could be to be in that role. So, all right, to kind of end, because I think, people listening to this, they might think, what are you, 31 now? I don't want to mess your age up really. So
32.
32. So, yes, I'm undershot. That's normally what I try to do. All right, so so people will kind of almost think it's easy kind of accelerating that fast in the span of 10 years, go from being this rock star teacher, leadership coach, get promoted up, and now you're assistant principal and possibly principal, pretty quickly. So what would you tell that person who kind of thinks it is a final lesson, kind of that it is that easy to kind of accelerate into that role? Because all of us come in most times with that mindset that we're just going to do all this great stuff. But to that person who kind of wants to accelerate like this, but it doesn't always happen that way.
So when it comes to accelerating and moving up and moving forward, I like to tell people just to think about it in this way. You'll know when you're ready. Mm-hmm. When you have the adequate knowledge and skills to deal with things at ease. For example, for teachers who are looking for a coaching position or an instructional specialist position at that, make sure a teacher can throw out any math problem to you and you can, with ease, explain how you would get students to answer it. Mm-hmm. Or if you are an English language arts teacher, and be ready for teachers to come and say, hey, can you model this lesson on the spot? Or can you show me a strategy for using, having students to answer the context clues questions or finding the main idea? Because I can guarantee you will know when you're ready when you have those tools in your toolbox, because you don't want to get to a position too fast and fail. Mm-hmm. That was some advice I got from someone long ago. Like, I know you're applying to be an administrator, but I'll tell you that the person was telling me about an experience where they became a principal and they were so excited. But the lady was so honest and she said, I have never failed so bad in my life. And that was an experience that I needed to tell myself to slow down and wait until you're ready. And you'll know you're ready because, again, like I keep saying, the proof is in the pudding. It'll either be your scores. It'll either be your colleagues saying, hey, can you do some trainings after school? Because that's how it started for me. I wasn't a coach or anything when I was a classroom teacher, but I was having little PD sessions in my classrooms in the evening for even for parents. I was having parent university classes in my classroom in the evenings. Nothing that was just had to be approved by the district or anything like that. It was just things that I deemed necessary to teach my parents what their students are having to do in class. And so doing the same things for teachers. So taking those opportunities upon yourself to share your knowledge and skills. And that way, when people came and said, oh, here's our new literacy coach, they were like, whoa, what took her so long? We knew she was ready. You want that reaction as opposed to, oh my goodness, how did she get here? Because she doesn't know 1 + 3 × 2. Like, how are you gonna teach somebody that? You know, so just making sure that you're ready and not trying to move up too quickly, because you want to make sure that you're ready to face the giant that is waiting for you at that next level. Because the giants get bigger, you know, the higher up you go.
And I would just tell people that's listening, like as a teacher, like it does make a difference when, like sometimes you don't, like I didn't even know Miss Dixon's scores before I was like, okay, I know. You don't have to hear somebody's scores to know that they know what they're talking about. And like if a person's in that role, they don't know what they're talking about. Because you got to think as a kid, you talking about those teachers who teaching at a low level, you're like, man, let me get up out of here. So if you're at a training with an administrator and they're trying to say teach some concept, you can be like, why am I listening to you? Like you don't like you can tell.
You can tell, it doesn't flow easily. I think I may have said flow in this interview maybe 4 or 5 times because it's so important to be able to flow, because when you know things, you flow with the knowledge that you have. And so when you start and a teacher approaches you with something and you start stumbling, you've lost just a tad bit of their respect, just a little bit, and their belief that you can come and help them to turn something around. So before you look up to go to that next level, make sure that you solve some problems at the level that you are right now. And I can attest to this because as a classroom teacher, I was able to help solve some of those problems, being that my scores were 95%. That was one. But then again, I was able to solve our grade levels discipline problems at that time. So I knew I was going to be an okay administrator because discipline was easy for me to deal with, because I knew how to build relationships with students and really get down to the why of what they were doing. Not just looking at what they were doing on the surface, but getting down to, why are you in there wiping off the stuff off the teacher's desk? Let's just get to that point, you know? And once you can solve problems at this level, then you're ready for a problem at another level, and you can keep excelling and going forward. So just make sure you're ready, and you will really know you're ready. And it's not to be anxious, because when I wanted to be an assistant principal, I wasn't anxious. I was waiting for the right school, because that principal who I was telling you about, who says she failed miserably, she took a job because it was the first one that came to her, but the campus wasn't right for her, and she wasn't prepared to deal with the needs of that campus.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to be a great principal somewhere else, but at that campus, she didn't have what it took to solve those problems. So you just kind of have to make sure all around you're ready to be able to solve a multitude of issues and problems.
Now, I think kind of TD Jakes even kind of talks about that. He says, like, you know, people be wanting stuff, but God, you may not even really been ready for it. And because I guess my story, I guess even a little bit is, I guess you say you were the trouble kid earlier, so I guess you kind of come with a different mindset as a teacher. But I know, like everybody always say, oh, Mr. Short, you go so hard. But I was like, man, I kind of went 19 years not doing that. So it's kind of like you got a different mindset. Because I know if I got or started to achieve some level of success at 21, I wouldn't have been ready for it. I wouldn't have been. So I kind of understand that, although I wasn't in teaching then, although people been telling me to do it since I was like 22, but I finally started doing it. But I kind of understand what you're saying, because sometimes you aren't ready for it, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't really ready for this. Or you might even realize you still love the classroom. But I think that's the thing too. So I just want to thank you for just coming to interview, because for one, you're one of the people that's been the most important people as far as like me as a teacher. But I kind of want other people to hear that too. I mean, they might have seen the Red Apple Award or something like this, but understand some of the schematics of what made you the teacher that you are. Because I think a lot of other people can kind of learn from it, not just the scores part, but just because you only talked about that for about 2% of the interview, but you've been talking about all these other things that lead up to that, and I think that's like the most important thing. So I just want to thank you for doing this interview. So I just want to tell the listeners, this has been the first episode, and I'm proud that this was the first episode of Phenomenal Conversations with Mr. Short with Na'Carol Dixon-Hall. And I just want to thank her again for coming on. And I think, you know, if y'all listen to this, you will learn a lot about what teaching is all about, not about the scores, but about building relationships and really being all about kids at the end of the day. So I just want to thank y'all. Thank you, Ms. Dixon, and have a great rest of the day, or phenomenal rest of the day. All right. See you later. Bye.
All righty.
All right.